Okay, let's go. All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Big Money Stylist Podcast. I'm back with Sarah. Sarah, you had an assignment last time. Did you complete that assignment? Look at that walk. Oh, like eyes down. Like eyes just went directly down to the table. Last time Sarah was on, I was like talking about assistants and assistant trainings. And I was like, you have one job. You have one job. I'm like, you need to hire yourself an assistant. Now she's literally about to pee her pants.
I marginally tried. I have a nail tech now.
That's a solid. That's like when somebody's like, I want to book with you, but let me ask my husband first. That's a solid no. That's a solid no.
Listen, I had to get some things in place before I hired an assistant.
Okay.
So now
you're ready?
Now I'm ready. Now I'm ready.
I like it. I always say start with where you're at. So I'm proud of you for there.
Thank
because sometimes people say, I want to hire an assistant. I'm like, do you have a full book of business? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, you have a marketing problem. Let's start there.
Right.
And then when we get a few leads in the door and we get a few clients and you're feeling stressed, then let's figure out how to set up an assistant.
Yes. So my situation was I wasn't quite set up and ready.
Because you didn't have an abundant problem with MBR clients?
No. Well, okay, so like living in a small town, it's very hard. Everybody that does hair already has a job doing hair.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, I need to get like a little bit of a structure in place, like figure out my schedule because since I've gone out of town so many times, I feel like my schedule's kind of all over the place. Last week when I got back from Scotland, I literally worked every day.
I mean, I guess that's an excuse. You did get married and you did go to Scotland. So like whatever, I'm giving you a pass for now.
Thank you. But I was like, okay, I need to like get everything in place so that when I do hire somebody as an assistant, I can say these are the days you're working, these are the times you're working.
Right.
So
also too, I think it's important too. I remember I've worked in small towns. I started my brand in small towns, and part of me is like, I felt like I needed to experience that in my career because that's one of the things our students say, well, I can't get MBR clients to pay that because I live in a small town, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how good is your marketing? How well do you frame yourself as the prize? And I would encourage you to like look about when you are ready to hire an assistant, you have to remember, don't go out of desperation and be like, well, I live in a small town and I'll just take whoever's available.
Yeah.
Imagine if you approached hiring an assistant like you approach getting a client, right? Because your mindset's there. You now have tons of MBR clients. They're paying you in the thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. So remember that when you're hiring an assistant. This isn't like, please help me. I'm desperate, Sarah. I need help. It's like, this is an opportunity for you to work with me. Do you know I'm an educator for Natural Beauty Rose? Mm-hmm. And literally make them apply. Yeah. Like if you're interested, click the jot form inside my bio and tell me why you're a good fit.
Right.
Or even like when I'm hiring, I just recently put out an opportunity for a personal assistant. And I don't know if you've heard of a video ask. Have you heard of that?
No.
Oh my God. So this might be a cool thing too.
That,
so it's instead of somebody saying like, hey, send me your resume, even in hair, like you could say, hey, I'm going to send you a video ask. It's basically like it's almost like it makes the process faster because it's like doing an in-person interview, right?
Well, and then you can see their personality.
Yes. And if they're too scared to get on a video and send me like the response, I'm like, I already know you're not a good fit.
Yeah.
And then you can see their energy and their vibe. And then you can invite them to do like an in-person, I call it an in-person working interview. And I do that even with my like nanny staff, with my, I realized over the weekend, I was like, I manage a shit ton of people. Like, good for me. Like, good for me. But I think that's while I want to tell you, and we'll report back to this, next month or whatever, whenever you're next in town, is don't forget when you are hiring that assistant to frame yourself as a prize and position yourself to somebody who truly wants to work for you as an opportunity. So that's all I will say there. And today, it's so funny because we always try to have a different topic, and I already forgot our topic. Do you remember what our topic is?
Continued education, or the importance of continued education.
I was like, what? I'm looking at this and I'm like reading. This is my old PDF from a training we did for my other students. Yes, continued education and why it's important. Or
just like a lack of continued education.
Well, it's so crazy too because I feel like, so when I started doing hair, there wasn't a lot of like self-educators. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like now everybody and anybody, if you have a social media following, you're like, come take my balayage class. And just because you're good at hair doesn't necessarily mean you're good at educating how you're like, it's not a class. It's truly a demo. And I learned this the
Right.
hard way in the beginning of my career when I was offering classes, AKA demos, because I didn't know why I didn't know how to educate, right? So I'm like, just watch me put these beads on, Kay, and then you just like slip this through and then you like stitch it together. Like, now here,
go home.
take my brand and that I've worked a decade for to figure this out
Yes.
and go offer it to your clients. And what all these little educators don't realize, I'm like, you're certifying somebody in your blah, blah, blah balayage technique, but you're not even like properly teaching them, right? And now you're putting your stamp of approval and your name on it. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's kind of crazy. So I always like tell people, I'm like, be careful because continuing education is important, but are you just taking a ton of different demos and are you actually applying it to your work behind the chair? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I feel like there's a difference between like taking 800 2-day classes versus like, for example, NBR, like that is what got it for me because I'm like, it's not just a 2-day class. It's an investment for a year where I'm like, okay, these people are going to pour into me and I'm going to be able to really get what I'm doing. And I tell people this all the time. If I were to have just learned NBR in 2 days, I would have quit.
Yeah, it's too hard.
It's way too hard.
Yeah.
It was way too hard.
Yeah.
And there are even things like a year into the course where I was like, oh, I didn't.
I've been doing that backwards.
I've been doing that wrong, yeah. So I think that that's really important, and I think a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, here's your 2-day thing. Go learn, and good luck with your life." And then a month in, you're just like, "What was that one thing that they said I was supposed to
And
do?"
I'm not saying that that's not bad. Like, I get a lot of value from, I still to this day go to color classes, updo classes, cutting classes, because I kind of like to see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
For me, I look at it as staying on point with what's current and trending as far as in the industry, right? But if I find something, I'm like, ooh, I really like, I'm loving this color technique or whatever it is. You're right. It's not a 2-day class. For me, it's
Yeah,
like
you're
you
like,
have
I want
to
more.
like I want more of this specific color technique. I want more of whatever it is. To me, that continuing education should be intentional, right? Not just hitting the checklist list of, I'm doing continuing education because I went and saw the top 10 social media people and I saw their demo. Like, to me, that's just like bragging rights. Like, I took their class, and I'm not saying that's bad. Like, you should be like, I just trained with, I'm actually kind of out of the loop with the social media thing, so I can't even give you like
yeah,
I can't even give you like a popular name right now. But you could be like, I just went and trained with Guy Tang, or I just went and trained, like that's great. Like, you should kind of like put that on your social media as like bragging rights, but really like look at like what you're learning and your continuing education. I guess my big thing is it intentional? Like, are you actually utilizing it to get what you want? Or are you just hitting the popular checklist saying like you're doing continuing education? Because here's my thoughts on it is that's not actually doing the work. That's like the fun part. That's like going to a movie. You're like, yeah, I paid for it.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I paid for it. But is it actually something that you can tactically apply to your business? Because a lot of times things that you can tactically apply, I feel like you have to do the work and it's kind of hard,
So maybe there's a difference between just education classes and continued education.
Yes, and that's really kind of what I'm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's really what I'm trying
It's
to.
deep.
That was so deep. Say that again.
Oh, I don't know.
Difference between.
There's a difference between education classes and continued education.
Right.
Because versus if you're going like, oh, I want to learn this balayage technique, that's maybe something you can learn in a 2-day class. Where if you're trying to specialize in extensions, for example, then you're going to want more than just that 2 days.
Yeah,
you
can't.
Want more.
And I was going to say, I have an online course. I have a 2-day class. I have a phase. We just launched a new accelerator program. I'm constantly retargeting to my internal list to move them up kind of like my value ladder. And it's just crazy because to me, that's the true evolution of continuing education is like, okay, you started here. Here's a taste of it. But what are the steps on this ladder that are going to really excel in I call it a value ladder because my brain's thinking of marketing, but like it's like an accelerator program inside of whatever you're trying to learn. If you want to do extensions and you're like, I think I want to do MBR, and you take the 2-day course, you take the online course and you're like, okay, that was good. And then you go home and you're like, you're frustrated and you're like, but if I don't offer you another program, you're just going to be frustrated and not use MBR. So I'm like, okay, you got a taste of it. Let's give you more continuing education. Here's this program.
Right.
Okay, try a little bit more. Then you're like, okay, you know what? I have a leads problem. I have an assistant problem. Okay, don't worry. I have another opportunity for you, right? To me, that truly is continuing education.
Yeah.
I like that how you worded it, though, because...
you're just like in different phases of life. So where you have a baby, you might not have time for a 12-month course, and you're like, I don't know if I want to get into extension, so maybe this little part is good for me to,
Can I just say?
yeah.
Okay.
This is a safe place.
This is a safe place. Okay. My husband's been out of town for 2 weeks. I'm down help right now, and one of my nannies was also on vacation.
Single mom life.
I literally, when people are like, "Oh, I didn't get it done," I'm like, I have 4 children and I run a business, and I'm like, my eyes are twitching. My eyes are fucking twitching right now because of the lack of sleep. And no, my point is, like, I show up. When I say I'm going to be there, I show up. I'm like, so when people tell me why they didn't do it or they can't do it or this life happened, I'm like, my eyeballs hurt and I want to like punch myself and then punch you in the face.
But I'm here because you committed.
Because I fucking committed. And there's so much power in committing. Like, even within continuing education, it's like, you can do it and hit the checklist, or you can commit to an outcome, truly. Like, ask yourself, like, inside of your continuing education, are you committing to an outcome? Because that's truly when you can look at something with intention.
Well, and you know how when you're watching a video and you're like, okay, I have all these things, and then you go apply it, and a month later you watch the same video and you're like,
you see
I didn't
something
even
else.
see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think aside from continued education, that's really important as well, because then you might not see things that you saw before. And then once you've consumed all of that content, you're like, well, I want more. Now what?
Right. I think that's true. I mean, I feel like that's one of the reasons I love like photos, is because I love looking at a photo and being like kind of analyzing my own work and being like,
I do that all the time.
Like, I didn't see that. I thought that was amazing at the time, right? But really being open to, I guess, feedback inside of your work. You know
I'm really
what I mean?
quick to look at all the things I've done wrong. I'm like, okay, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. So I have to make myself say, okay, what's one thing you did really great?
Yeah.
And one thing you would change for next time.
You're definitely like a perfectionist personality. I can see that in you. I can see that in your feed. You like a really pretty aesthetic. I think we talked about this last time. You like your feet were like your feet's too pretty, Sarah. You're too good of an artist. I don't know what to tell you, because it like
throw some ugly in there.
But it is true. There's like 2 types of artists. There's like the ones that like want it like they're so hard on themselves, and you're like, do you like? That's why I'm like, hey, even when hiring an assistant, I'm like, hey, do you see how good your work is? You bust your ass. You come here. You train for me. Like, I don't want you to tell me you live in a small town. I want you to frame yourself as a prize and somebody who will drive 30 minutes. I know where you live. I mean, you're far out, but you're not that far out. Like, if I found you and I was like, oh my God, and I'm a new artist, I'm like, she's a trainer for MBR.
Like, I don't even care, I'll drive there.
I have the opportunity. Yeah, I will drive 45 minutes both ways to work with her. But you have to believe that in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I keep like nailing that into you. I feel like you're in trouble on this podcast.
Like, get an assistant. If anyone's looking to work for me.
Sarah lives in Utah. She's currently sending out applications for an assistant if you're interested.
She's DM me. Cool. Sarah.haircandy.
Sarah.haircan. DM her on Instagram. I'm not kidding you. If you were listening to her, like, seriously, DM her. I'm gonna next time. I'm really gonna follow through on this.
Do you know what's funny is I didn't know I was doing a podcast till today, and before I came, I told Trevor, I was like, I hope I don't see Danielle, because I hope she doesn't remember that she asked me to get us.
You know, it's my strength, my follow up.
Cool. So I'll know for next time.
I'll know for next time. It's so funny. I like doing these podcasts because I feel like it's another version of me. And it's fun to pull people in and get a different perspective, especially like sharing in our industry. Like, I'm comfortable in front of a camera now, but I didn't start that way. Like, I'm actually pretty introverted. And
Same. Believe that.
But it's like the more you do something, the easier it becomes. So that's why I just assumed you knew you were going to be on the podcast. You didn't?
Nope.
That's all right. Welcome.
This morning, they're like, oh, you're going to be pulled from class to do a podcast. I'm like, cool.
You're like, I thought because I was teaching, I got away from that.
I did.
No.
It's fine. Here I am.
It's fine. But yeah, going back to our topic of continuing education, I just think the only thing I can tell you guys from my experience is really work towards an outcome.
Yeah.
Like that's really, like, education is great, but what is your commitment to that education? And a lot of times, I think I shared this on a few other podcasts too, is I think that we look at all these little areas where we need to improve in, but like, start with where you're at. So if you just are trying to get more MBR clients, then you have a marketing problem. You have a leads problem, right? You don't.
Well, and it's like what you said with the assistant. I can't, like, how do I train an assistant? Well, do you have any MBR clients? Well, no.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, see where you're at and go from there.
And then take the courses or the continuing education based on what you need in that moment, right? And you're going to see other things along the way. But if you learn to look at where you're at, not where you think you're at, and that sounds so harsh because I think it's so important to have lofty goals. I think it's important to be like, hey, this is where I know I'm going, but not get so overwhelmed that you're like, I don't know how to get there. Never mind. I don't know if I can get there. Like, all you have to do is commit and start. I always say too, like there's no such thing as perfection, just progress. And that's something I wanted to tell you too, because you are such a perfectionist. And so it's like you said, you kind of have to take a step back and celebrate the progress, right? Like where you can look back and be like, okay, because when you celebrate the progress, it really pushes you to even want to do more. And then it's like 6 months go by, 8 months goes by, 12 months go by. 1 year. I love some of the trainers. I think Kiki and Allie have been posting like me 1 year ago, 4 years ago. And I'm like, wow, I remember that, Kiki. Wow. You know what I mean? And it's cool to see that everybody will kind of progress in life at their own pace. But I believe there's times where we go in like warp speed, because for me, it was like I had so much pressure that like I had no other choice. And I don't know if you've ever felt like that, where you had like so much pressure in your life. I'm sure you have. You have kids. You've gone through divorce. You're now remarried. And Almost? Yeah. Almost. Okay. Almost remarried.
We go to Mexico in 2 weeks.
Okay. Sorry. I feel like I'm spoiler alert.
It's fine. No, because we did.
I saw pictures. You posted something.
We went to Scotland and got our pictures done, and then we're getting married in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Gosh. Yeah.
I just saw the pictures, and I was like, you guys got married? Oh, because you did your honeymoon first, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. You did it all backwards.
Do everything backwards.
You did it all backwards. Okay. I was so confused.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I was going to say, so I was talking to a student this morning on a walk and talk, and she was like, I'm just behind, I'm behind. And I'm like, well, are you behind? Or is that just where you're at right now? Because I feel like a lot of the times students will try to be like, well, this is the end goal. I want to be a licensed artist. I don't know how to be a licensed artist. I'm so overwhelmed. I have all these assignments. I don't know what to do. And then it's like, well, you need to start where you are, like you had just said. And she's like, I'm so behind. I'm not where I want to be. And I just said, well, I would like you to change your mindset and think of it as like, you're not behind. This is just where you are right now. So instead of like being so hard on yourself and saying, oh, I'm just so behind, say, you know what? Here's where I'm at. This is the reality of the situation, is I'm not where I wanted to be, but look at your end result. Look at where you are now and think of all the things that you have to do in between and just
go
do something.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I truly believe that like, it's a level of guilt, right? It's a level people feel guilty and they let guilt dictate like them progressing forward. And so they end up staying in this frozen place out of guilt.
Because they're too afraid to do anything.
Yeah. And I'll share this story really quick. I remember it was probably like 5 years into my brand. And this was like back when I was working late. Like I would get up, I would make my kids lunches, I would drop them off at school. I would drive 30 minutes to my salon in Laguna. I would work all day till like dark. I was working from like 8 to 8 p.m. I would literally drive home. Like the nanny would pick up the kids from the school, like put them in bed. I'd drive home. I remember this one night I like drove home. It's like dark. And I think Garrett might have been out of town. I can't remember. And my nanny had probably already put my kids to bed. I literally just like sat in my car and like bawled my eyes out.
And cried?
Just cried. And then I like dried my tears because I wanted to say bye to the nanny. Then I went, after working like a 12-hour day, I went into my computer. I was working on my blog at the time. And I'm just fucking tired, right? And I'm just burnt out. And I just remember like collapsing to the floor and crying again and feeling like all this guilt. Like, you're a shitty mom. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get this like peaceful feeling just like come over my body. And it was like, how dare you let guilt determine the impact that you can make? And I was like, oh shit. Like, and I always say when I hear this voice, I believe it's almost like me preaching down to it's my higher self.
I was gonna say that.
Like, you know what I mean? Like she's like, you got this, Danielle. Like you have no idea. And I just had this calm come over me. And I remember getting up, drying my tears. I finished that blog post, sent out my emails, did all my stuff. And I was like, from this day forward, I will refuse. Because I knew where I wanted to go with like my education and my calling and all that. And I was like, I refuse to operate out of guilt. Like I refuse. And the next day, here's the cool thing. If you are that person that's operating out of guilt, what do you need to change in your business so you don't have that feeling? For me, I stopped working till 8 p.m. I stopped working Saturdays, and I didn't like stop. Like I literally like got on the phone like that Saturday and I was like, hi, I'm canceling all my Saturday appointments. If you'd like to book, like, here. And I got so burnt out that it wasn't like a slow, gradual, like,
Oh no, it was like, we're done.
yeah, I literally was like, I'm sorry if it doesn't work out. I don't want to do your hair anymore. But I was in such a painful place that I was like, I have to change, right?
Oh, that's totally my personality.
But everybody has like those moments, right? It's like, I'm sure you had like 2 young kids where you were like, okay, I need MBR. I got to make more behind the chair, right? You were single for a bit, like, and you're still very like independent on your own. So it's like when you kind of had that pressure, you're like, okay, well, what do I need to do to produce the income for myself and my family?
Yeah, and I kind of get to the point where just me as my personality, I'll take a whole bunch and I'll take it all on, I'll do all the things, and then I finally get to a point where I'm like, enough is enough, I'm done. And so I'm like, I'm cutting off these days, I'm doing these things, I'm doing these things, and that's kind of around the time where I found NBR, and I was like, well, they said do all this, we're fucking doing all of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. Which I have this funny story to share. So my daughter just decided, so I coach cheer also.
No.
And I don't
Were
know,
you
I
a
do all these
cheerleader?
things. I was,
Oh.
yeah. So I coached cheer, and my daughter like came to the practice. I've tried to get her to do it. She didn't want to do it. And so she finally came to a practice, and she's like, okay, I really want to do it. And I coach with another girl, so I'm like, you're going to have to ask her. It's not my call. So she goes up. She's the flyer. I don't know if you know a lot about cheer, but she's the flyer. She ended up falling on the ground, and she starts bawling. She's like, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. I quit. And I pulled her aside, hoping that none of the other girls would hear me. And I was like, Bella, I was like, I get that you're scared. And I was like, you have to get up and do it again. And she's
Otherwise
like,
she'll leave,
right.
yeah.
I was like, you have to get up and do it again. She's like, I don't want to. And I said, Bella, what's our family like thing? Because like it's a thing now. And she's like, we're doing it scared. And I was like, we're not just doing it scared, we're doing it fucking scared.
How old is she?
She's 10.
Nice.
And well, it's funny because she goes, well, you talk like that all the time. So I was totally like, she just not phased. But I looked up, and a couple of the other girls were like,
your mom's a freaking drill sergeant.
Your mom's yelling at you. And I was like, no, but I want my daughter to know like things, you know, like you do it and you do it scared and it's fine. And she did it again, and she's like, oh, it wasn't that scary. And I was like, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy too, though. That's like an amazing story, because I feel like a lot of times we see our kids fall and we want to coddle them, right? And I'm sure you thought like, I can sit here and coddle her, and then she'll have this story,
right.
all of a sudden this small story of where she got dropped or whatever it is that like blows out of proportion, and all of a sudden in life was led down to this one moment when she fell and got dropped, and you're like,
she's garbage and she's a homeless person now.
Right. And you're like, no, like I don't care if you don't want to do cheer, but pick yourself back up and try it, so that even if you don't want to do it, you don't have this like story that's like, oh my God, I got dropped and it wasn't for me, you know? And it's true. You can't let your stories even dictate necessarily where you're going to go. Since we're on the side of sharing stories, I used to be super scared of flying and traveling, like so bad where I'd have like anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
Like so bad. And when I first launched my brand, I moved from Salt Lake City to Gilbert, Arizona, and I had no clients. And I was like, shit, how do I market and get more clients? So I would fly back to Utah. Yeah, you had to fly. I had to fly. But it was really hard for me, because not only did I have to like, I was like, oh my God, I need to go fly. I flew every once a month, and I'd fit in as many clients as I could, and I'd take tons of videos and photos, and I wouldn't say I'm taking more clients in Utah. I use those to say, hey, I'm taking clients in Arizona, right? And you do what you have to do. But for me, that was really scary. But now, like, I'm no longer have the fear of flying. Like, it doesn't faze me. But right? But it took me a long time to get over it. And the only way I got over it was flying by myself. Like, I was like, no, you're a big girl. Like, I know, as stupid as that sounds, I would literally be like, I can't do it. I'd get on the plane, and like, I had a few times where I walked off the plane. I was like, I can't fucking do it. I was having a panic attack. I was like, this is embarrassing. I'm a grown ass woman. And I was like, no, I have to feed my kids. I have to get content. I have to get over this. Right. And so it's like, sometimes I feel like in order to get over something that's a fear, you just have to do it. And I find artists too, like, since we're on this topic, it's like we get really good at something, but we don't want to like make ourselves uncomfortable, right? And I've recognized this in myself, and I don't know if you do this too, but the minute I'm like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, I know I have to do this. Like I have to do this. Like, because it's like I have to prove it to myself, you know?
Oh yeah. And I think it's really like back to continued education, artists, like all the things. I think In a way, in my mind, like fear doesn't actually exist. We make it exist.
Right.
And so, whereas if you're trying to join a class or if you're getting on a plane, you're just like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. You start to like give yourself those feelings. You almost make yourself scared when it was never really a big deal to begin with.
I think too that fear is an excuse in the sense that you can like build up these massive stories. Like it's like, well, if I do this, then this can happen. Then and it's like you assume worst case scenario. Because you just decided to take a marketing class, like, and it was $500, and all of a sudden you're bankrupt and your kids can't eat, and like you're selling shit out of your house, like, you just talked yourself out of this, this course or whatever it was because of your own fear, right? So I always tell people too when it comes to the concept of fear, like, does your fear create these wild, outlandish stories? Then that's when you know, like, this isn't intuition, this is my fear talking. And you have to learn to listen to your voices correctly and let your voices lead and guide you correctly. Because I sometimes let my fear and my anxiety lead me. And that drives me crazy. Because I'm like, it's okay to be aware of these things, but you can't let this fear and this anxiety dictate like what you want to do and who you want to become, like truly.
I always tell myself, I'm like, okay, I can sit in it for a second. I can feel it for a second. And then I can acknowledge like why I'm scared. And usually it's because I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want to look stupid.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Because I'm like, I don't want to look stupid in front of everybody else that knows what they're doing. And so even like I said, like why I joined this whole entire program to begin with is because really it was like I was being pushed outside of my comfort zone and they were like, that's nice. No one cares about your stories. Like do it anyway. Like in a way, I mean, they didn't say that, but I was like, okay, I'm going to just do it. I'm going to continue to do it. I was so scared. I was like, I live in a small town. I had all the stories. I was like, I live in a small town. I don't have any clients. I'm just Sarah Dot hair candy. I don't know. Like, I don't even know why I color hair the way that I do. And people are like, what? No, you're doing it anyway. I'm like, okay. But it's like
it becomes less scary.
And I look back at myself like 6 months ago or even a year ago. I'm like, I don't even know who that person is anymore.
Right. I think, and kind of coming back to our topic of continuing education is like, if you're taking education, it's because you want to learn and grow, right?
Yeah.
Like, truly, like if you're buying the software is the easy part, doing the work is the hard part, being uncomfortable is the hard part, right? And you have to discern between, am I just purchasing these courses or am I actually doing the work to continue the education? Truly. Like, ask yourself, because otherwise it's like you're feeding yourself with like, oh, I'm buying all these courses and these classes, but what are
they actually hard?
Yeah,
like, are they pushing you?
Yeah, exactly. Like, is it making you uncomfortable? Can you look at yourself and just more than just saying like, oh, I'm a better painter? Does your bank account reflect that you're a better painter? Because that'll just feed your ego all day long. But are you actually profitable from the courses and the classes that you are taking? Because for me, like that's really when I know like I'm progressing. Is like. Yeah, like I'm having
There's
more
proof.
There's proof, right? You can't hide behind the proof of doing the work because your bank account is a reflection of that, right? So that's another thing like I've had to personally work on is like when you're a good artist, you can kind of live in the land of like I'm just a really good artist and like I'm good with where I'm at. Like if I settled in and just said I'm good with where I'm at, I wouldn't have made the impact. And same with everybody else, right? Like there's no such thing as like I've made it.
No.
Like there's always a next level. And I've had moments in my life where I've seasons of hustle and then like seasons where I've had kids and I'm like, I gotta be a mom for a minute. Yeah. And now I'm kind of back in this season where I'm like, cool, my family's complete. I refuse to like, I love my children, but I really want to do both. I want to work, I want to inspire, I want to build.
Well, there's no reason you can't do both.
Yeah. You can. You have to set boundaries and prioritize and sometimes lose sleep. And
Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, are you ever just content? Like, are you content
That is
with
the
where you're
worst
at?
place to be in.
And my answer, I said no. I said, honestly, I'm never content. Even where I finally, if I hit a goal, I'm like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Like, okay, now what? And I mean, there's a double-edged sword to that where I should be like, I am happy with my life, but I'm like, okay, well, now what? How can I grow more and how can I do more? And I think inside of continuing my education, like even here, I still learn things as a trainer. There's like the trainer program and all those things. So I think I'm
addicted to the high of growth. Like, honestly.
Same.
Like, I'm not even going to lie. Like, when I'm content, I can be content for a weekend in Cabo.
Admitting it is the first step.
And then I'm kind of like, all right, shit's not getting done around here because I lose that high of growth. Like, and you know what? I always joke around with my husband. I'm like, hey, you can have all sorts of addictions. Like mine at least propels me forward to where
True.
I feel like I'm constantly, I mean, like I said, there's times where I'm like, okay, like, am I just running on a hamster wheel? Do I have this fake illusion of growth because I'm just like doing all this busy work?
Yeah.
But that's why I really am very goal oriented, because it's a direct reflection of, is my busyness reflecting the work that's getting done?
Right.
So yes, I want to close this podcast. First, thank you for coming on and letting me
welcome.
call you out about not getting an assistant. I'm gonna keep calling you out, even if I'm calling you out for the
But
next.
now I'm gonna get all the DMs.
Okay,
so
you're gonna get
that's
all the.
great.
I'm just like gonna keep calling you out till like eventually you're gonna be like, I have 4 assistants. I'm like,
I'm
there
like,
you
Danielle,
go.
pipe down. I have
And you're
4.
like, I double my income. I'm like, okay. But you guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We try to share value every single week. We try to share value every single week. We have a different topic. Sometimes it gets a little spicy, or sometimes it gets a little ADD-ish, but
off track. Yeah.
it gets a little off track. But we are artists. We are currently behind the chair. I created a system of hair extensions called Natural Beaded Rose, and we have a 1-year academy program. So again, I have different offers. If you're just now hearing about Natural Beaded Rose, if you're like, these guys are crazy, I kind of want to know more information, follow my hair page, Natural Beaded Rose Hair Extensions. We have an online course coming out this week. Did you know I have an online course coming out this week? So by the time they listen to it next Tuesday, if you guys are like, oh my God, they only have this academy program, I'm launching an online course. It's only going to be open for a limited time. So if you're listening to this podcast next Tuesday and you're like, okay, fine, you sold me. Like, this is a good opportunity to just kind of see what MBR is about. But again, continue your education. If you like it, keep going to really perfect your craft. Okay, Sarah, any closing words on continuing education?
You really got. I was like so really into all.
You thought I was just going to close it down, but I'm like, any
did.
final thoughts? You're in there teaching. You're teaching the class.
I just would say, even if you're not ready to commit to like a full package or to the full big thing or 10 years of courses, like start small. Just pick something that you can commit to. Look at where you're at in your life, really evaluate, like, what can I add to my plate right now? And if it's only like the introductory course or what is it called?
Start with where you're at and the time that you have, and don't think that you need to commit more time than you need to. Just start with what time you have.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, like, people think commit is like this massive commitment. No, just commit to the small things, because you commit to the small things and that helps you to commit to the big things later. So
done.
Great. Final thoughts. Mic drop. All right. Thanks, you guys, for listening. Catch a new episode every Tuesday of the Big Money Stylist Podcast.